Hello, I'm Janet Morana, the Executive Director of Priests for Life, and welcome to our segment together. And of course, I've been telling you about the programs that I've been going back into our archives, programs that were recorded by Father Pavone and I over a decade ago for Sky Angel. They asked us to do a pro-life program called The Gospel of Life. The thing about those programs is we had a lot of very good guests, and the information that the guests were talking about and the topics we spoke about were just as pertinent today. So I've decided to go back and delve into those programs. Well, today's program, we're going to be talking to Dr. Philip Ney. He's a dear friend of mine and Father Pavone's. We've known him since the late 90s. He's a Canadian psychiatrist, and nobody has researched the topic more than abortion, I think, than Dr. Philip Ney. In fact, Dr. Ney is the founder of a healing program called Hope Alive. And in fact, I am a certified counselor in the Hope Alive program, and I can tell you that Dr. Ney has really studied the effects of abortion on the women, on the men, and the whole family. And some of his insights are very, very important. And one of the things he's going to talk about in this show is how we have to deal with someone who's had an abortion, that they have to face the hard truth of what they've done in order to get to healing. So let's take a look at what Dr. Ney had to say in this program from the Gospel of Life.
Brutally honest should we be? A psychiatrist explores the answers next on Gospel of Life. Hello, I'm Reverend Frank Pavone, Director of Gospel of Life Ministries. Welcome to our program. I'm joined by Janet Morana, our Associate Director. And Janet, we're going to introduce our viewers today to a very special friend of ours whom we interviewed in this studio on a previous occasion. And we're going to watch some of his footage, some insights into various aspects of the abortion issue and of healing those who have been affected by abortion.
Well, you know, Dr. Ney, I think, has been practicing psychiatry up in British Columbia, Canada, and other parts of the world for over almost 40 years, right, Father?
More than that, yes. He's been in practice since 1965, and he's both a psychologist and a psychiatrist, so he's a medical doctor, he's done surgery. He's also a researcher. He's researched, he's been a professor, full professor in 5 different universities on various continents, is a medical journal reviewer. And I think that there is nobody in the world who's done more research on abortion than Dr. Philip Ney. So we're really going to hear from an expert in our program today.
Yeah. And, you know, not only has he done the research, but then he does the healing. You know, he's developed a program called Hope Alive. Mm-hmm. I myself am in the midst of being trained as a Hope Alive counselor, and recently I was in France where he had his annual international meeting of counselors from all over the world that are trained in this Hope Alive method to deal with abortion, the damage of abortion, and heal people from that. So his work is really incredible.
Now, he takes a medical approach to abortion,
right.
And he says, look, if you have some kind of a problem that requires surgery, you're not going to mess around. You're going to go in there and you're going to cut, and it's going to be ugly and painful, and that's how you come to healing. And he takes the same approach to those who have suffered and are suffering because they had an abortion, and says, look, you have some serious healing to do, and part of that healing is to face honestly the truth about what happened. And Dr. Ney's words about that, just from the point of view of a medical doctor, remind me of what Pope John Paul II said from a religious and ethical point of view when he wrote in that great document, The Gospel of Life, that we need to have the courage to call things by their proper name. What is it that you did? And he says to those who have had abortions, face honestly what happened. Well, that's not only good religious and ethical advice. As Dr. Ney will tell us, That's excellent medical advice.
That's right. And, that's, I deal with the women from the Silent No More Awareness campaign, and part of their healing journey, the most difficult thing is when they get to that part of their testimony and they re-say that I killed my baby. But as we see from Dr. Ney, that's a major step in coming to healing, is coming to terms with that phrase, I killed my baby.
Well, let's listen now to psychiatrist and abortion expert Dr. Philip Ney about facing hard truths.
The problem is, on the one hand, people have got to realize what they've done. And when they realize what they've done, the more they realize it, the more guilty they're going to become. So when you're counseling people like this, you have to help them realize this was a baby. This was not only a baby, this was a person with a name and a person with an identity, a person who had a future. And of course, the more the person realizes this, the guiltier they feel. And who wants to make people feel guilty? I certainly don't enjoy that. But still, they've got to recognize that harsh truth. And once they've got to the bottom of that, then they can start dealing with it. And then we ask them to do a number of things. And the best resolution of guilt is reconciliation. And you and I are both in that business.
Yes.
And it's beautiful to see what reconciliation does.
It really is. This is an important point, too, because so many people who are, they're Christian, they want to be nice, they don't want to hurt people, and that's good as far as it goes, except that it sometimes keeps them from leading another person to the point that you just said was so necessary, namely that they face the evil that they've done.
Right.
So they feel guilty for making someone else feel guilty.
Right.
And yet you're saying that unless that person comes to the point where they honestly face the evil they've done, they're actually stuck in their guilt and they can't get on the road to healing.
That's right.
Yeah.
And this is why it's so bad to have superficial counseling. And it's axiomatic in medicine that when you're going to treat somebody, you hit it hard, whether it's a tumor or a bacterial infection, you hit it hard the first time. Because if you don't do it right the first time, the chances that it will recur are much higher. And when it recurs, then it becomes much more difficult to deal with.
Oh, it's almost like you're training the disease to get stronger.
That's right.
Instead of wiping it out with a strong hit at the beginning.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we have to think carefully, you and I and a number of other people, about what is the most effective and efficient way of doing this. And what is the standard way of doing this? We've got to do this. Because there are not 10 ways to do an appendectomy. I mean, an appendectomy is an appendectomy. This is post-abortion counseling. It can't be 200 different ways of doing it.
It's like you said to me in a recent conversation, there was a time when it comes to appendectomies, I mean, doctors were discovering what was going on and they started to devise a way of dealing with it, and probably different ones did it different ways, but there had to come a point where a standard was developed.
That's right.
This is how appendectomy is done. And now anybody then who becomes a doctor that wants to do this, they have to abide by those standards.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Ney, I remember a talk you gave some years ago where you were speaking about this healing of women after abortion, and you pointed out that that we can't have a woman come in and simply say to her, well, you aborted your baby, but don't worry, your baby is with Jesus now. We have to first get her to face the fact and admit your baby died. Tell us about that.
Well, it's kind of interesting because you're such a gentleman. You put it in that passive way. Your baby died? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Your baby was killed. Your baby was killed by you. Your baby was killed deliberately. You paid somebody to murder your baby. I mean, that's the guts of it. And you're right. People flinch from that sort of thing, but I don't know how else to say that. Because the ex-abortionists, if you ask them how they term it, they say, murder. We used to murder babies. So if the ex-abortionists are going to say that, then that's what it must be. It is murder. It is a hired murder. It's a callous murder. It's a get on with your life having murdered your child. These are harsh realities. But when you're helping people, you have to help them deal with reality. And that's part of where realistic hope comes from, and that's why we have Hope Alive. It's a live hope because it's realistic. It's not a false hope. And things are not going to get that much better. It's like a physician talking to a patient with cancer. The physicians say, well, don't worry about it. You're going to get better. And the patient says, come on, doctor, be honest. Don't kid me. Now, please tell me what the reality is. So interestingly enough, people do want to know the harsh because they know that is the starting point. They know they've got to deal with that. And when people try to cover it off with, well, your baby died or went to heaven or whatever and will come back again, that's what many people believe now. You know, the baby visited them once, they aborted it, went back to heaven and just waiting for another turn to come back. And genetically, that's impossible. It just doesn't happen. It's not the same person, even if it was the same spirit. But no, they've got to see the harsh reality. And of course, this is why sometimes the things that we do in Hope Alive counseling is very, very unpopular. Can't you do it more smoothly? Can't you do it more gently? And I say, well, would you say that about surgery? You know, I mean, you're going to put a Band-Aid on it when it has to be a deep cut and there's blood and guts flowing in every direction? No, you do what has to be done, even if in the process you hurt the person. Mm-hmm. And that's the mandate of medicine. You do what has to be done for the long-term benefit of the patient, not to make them feel good in the interim.
And friends, we'll be back with more by Dr. Ney after this break.
There's nothing wrong with your television set. You don't see anything because there's nothing there. Abortion, the most common surgery in America. Why don't we ever see what it looks like? A message from Priests for Life.
Happy birthday to you.
The decision to have an abortion not only affects that moment in your life,
Kristen Gordon.
it affects many precious moments to come.
I now pronounce you man and wife.
Please remember, where there's life, there's hope. A message from Priests for Life.
Well, welcome back to our program. We're going to see more of Dr. Philip Ney. And Janet, in this next segment, Dr. Ney talks about an aspect of facing the difficult truths, and that is looking at abortion for what it is.
And as you know, Father, on these programs, that's one of the things we always challenge our viewers, and to do is to look at what abortion is, encourage to show the pictures, to their friends and family, to say, if you think you're supporting abortion, this is what we're talking about. Well, Dr. Ney also applies it now to healing. For people who've participated in abortion, had an abortion, a man or a woman, very often we're criticized for showing the graphic images that we're going to hurt them. But Dr. Ney points out that you've got to face this image and see what I've done in order to enter fully into the healing process.
Well, and not only that, in terms of the people who've had abortions, but in terms of the general public. And remember, we're about to hear from not only a psychiatrist, but a child psychiatrist.
That's right.
And because this question of what it does to children and to those who've had abortions is a very important one. He's going to give us some very good wisdom right now about that. So let's listen once again to psychiatrist Dr. Philip Ney. Dr. Ney, I'd like to bring up an issue which is the cause at times of some controversy and division within the pro-life effort, and that has to do with exposing the horror of abortion visually. Many groups, in various different ways and by various different methods, show forth the pictures of the aborted babies as a way of awakening the conscience of the public, breaking through the denial, making people recognize how horrible this is. And we know that it saves lives. We've seen it turn people around sometimes in a matter of seconds from being pro-abortion to being pro-life. But what some people will worry about in this process is two basic areas that come up often as areas of concern. One is this hurting that segment of the population who have had abortions? Is this traumatizing them? Is this adding to their guilt? Is this hurting them? To show them these images, especially if they see them unexpectedly. And secondly, likewise, the matter of children. And you're a child psychiatrist, so certainly you can speak with authority on this. people worried that if children see these pictures of the babies torn apart, that, again, this is going to damage and traumatize them. Can you comment on this whole theme?
Well, yes. It is much more complex, I think, than many people think about it. Because trauma and damage, not the same thing. Of course, we traumatize people all the time. We traumatize them with the effects of smoking. Do you know you're likely to get lung cancer and heart disease, etc.? That's traumatic. Does that make them wiser? Well, a certain number of people, it certainly will. In my day, when I was a young student, I mean, people were shown the cadavers of people who had been smoking on their life, and you look at these blackened lungs and you think, oh my gosh, why would anybody do that? So it does help to turn people around. So trauma is not necessarily a bad thing. Damage, now it all depends how you handle a child's question. Mommy, what is that? Oh, don't look at that, that's terrible. Because children will pick up on their parents' reaction and they will feel as they see their parents feel. For instance, there was a study during the bombing of London, and it was interesting because the children would run out in the streets and watch the airplanes dropping bombs until they heard their parents screaming, and then they became frightened. So children don't necessarily become frightened by just looking at something. So their parents certainly have to guide them. Now, my concern, and I think it's a useful thing, and I support it, but my concern is for the Christians who look at it over and over again and don't react. Every one of us seeing an aborted baby should get down on our knees and ask God to forgive us, because we probably had a part in the murder of that baby. And that's where, you know, the silent screen was such an effective tool. But if you watch people watching the silent screen, and here's a baby in the process of being murdered, please pass me the popcorn or the Coke. Totally inappropriate, because people become inured. It's no longer a death of a person. This is, it's a fetus that's just torn apart. Now, how do I know that? Well, because that's part of our medical school training. We had to have that. We did autopsies, and we did anatomy labs on cadavers. And that was really, really, really tough. Here you are cutting the flesh of a person apart. And you had to learn how to do this. But you sure don't want the general person to be inured to the cutting up of human flesh, particularly babies. I hope they cringe, I hope they look away, I hope they cry, I hope whatever. But don't just look at it, that's awful.
So the very reaction that many people are afraid of bringing about in people, namely that they'll get upset, that they'll get angry, is what you're saying the normal healthy reaction.
It is the healthy reaction, right.
It's the, oh, well, okay, big deal, so that is what it is. That you're saying is where there's serious problem.
That's very damaging. Yeah. That's very damaging. Of course, it brings up another issue is all of these post-abortion problems, right? And we measure people who feel guilty, who feel anxious, who feel depressed, etc., as if they were pathological reactions. And I said, wait now, are we doing this upside down? The way it should be is that these are normal reactions to this kind of a trauma. The abnormal reactions are the cool ones, the callous ones. Those are the sick people, not the ones that are showing a great deal of anxiety or depression. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes we get our thinking wrapped around the wrong way because we're not thinking clearly about issues that Christians should have a much more clear focus on because they're not afraid of truth.
Well, we're very grateful to Dr. Ney for those insights. And Janet, in these programs themselves, we show those images. And we are so grateful for this opportunity to be able to put on the airwaves the graphic reality of abortion, because this is what stirs people's consciences to be able to make the sacrifices necessary to do the work that will bring this to an end.
You know, and if people are interested in reading more and learning more, Dr. Ney has written several books. He has research papers up on his website, and he has a special website for that. It's called messengers2.com, and people can go there and learn more of this great work that Dr. Ney has done.
Messengers2.com. Yeah, I recommend people to read his books, especially those who are involved in the pro-life effort, in the healing ministry, clergy, and anyone interested in the abortion issue. Because as we said at the outset, I don't think there's anyone in the world who's done more research on abortion than Dr. Ney, and these insights are very, very valuable, and a lot of the research you won't find anyplace else.
That's right.
We're going to...
You seem so stressed lately. What's happened?
I just can't do this anymore. No. A few months ago, I had an abortion. I just can't stop thinking about it.
It's difficult, I know. I've been there myself.
Really? You seem okay.
I wasn't, and then I got help at Rachel's Vineyard. You should call them.
Rachel's Vineyard, healing the pain of abortion, one weekend at a time.
When I found out I was pregnant, I thought I would lose my job.
My boyfriend told me to choose between him and the baby.
I worried about staying in school.
I was already struggling to care for one child. My parents told me I wasn't ready to be a mom, so I had an abortion. I had physical problems afterwards.
I went from relationship to relationship.
I hated myself.
I started to have nightmares. I cried when I saw a pregnant woman. I tried to commit suicide.
I couldn't bond with the child I later had.
I tried to numb my pain with alcohol.
I struggled with depression. I had trouble conceiving again.
You see, abortion didn't solve our problems.
It just created different ones.
Each of us thought we were the only ones struggling afterward.
Now we realize many women regret their choice.
That's why we are silent no more.
We found help and healing, and you can too. Call or go online today.
I know you found the words of Dr. Ney. Sometimes harsh reality, isn't it? When a woman's destroyed a child from abortion. And of course, just now you saw a spot about Rachel's Vineyard healing ministry. That's actually part of the ministry here at Priests for Life. You know, Rachel's Vineyard was, of course, founded by Dr. Teresa Burke and her husband Kevin and their pastoral associates here at Priests for Life. And of course, you know, Dr. Ney talked about women having to face the hard truth of what they've done in an abortion. And of course, I know from my work with Rachel's Vineyard, I'm also a certified counselor for Rachel's Vineyard too. I've done numerous retreats helping women go through the harsh reality of facing the fact that they did lose that child to abortion. But, you know, and sometimes with some women, they had that abortion because they felt they had no freedom. They had no choice. So what I want to say is we're here for you. We're here to reach out to you. If you've had an abortion, or know someone who's had an abortion, we're here to extend a hand out to say, come to us. Come to Rachel's Vineyard. And I want to send you to a special website. I want you to go to abortionforgiveness.com. Again, it's abortionforgiveness.com. When you go there, you just have to put in your zip code. And up will come the nearest Rachel's Vineyard program for you, where you can find help. Now, you might be saying, Janet, but we're in the pandemic. And yes, unfortunately, our Rachel's Vineyard retreats, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, are on hold right now. But the good news is there's certified counselors that are affiliated with every retreat site. So when you go to abortionforgiveness.com and put in your zip code, you'll see where the nearest retreat site is. There'll be an email and a name and a phone number of someone you can reach out to, and they can put you in touch with the counselor that's connected with that team. You can start a conversation with them, and then as soon as the pandemic is lifted, you could be signed up for the next retreat. So please don't feel that because we're in this situation right now, you can't have some help. You can. And I can tell you, during these programs, when I've been promoting abortionforgiveness.com, I can tell you of wonderful conversations have become, and people have beginning to take those first steps to healing by reaching out and talking to someone. That's the first step. Reach out and talk. So again, go to abortionforgiveness.com. Thank you, and God bless.